Hello and welcome, everybody. It's Malfa Perkins from Astrology. This is the path forward. This is our astrology forecast for the week of December 9th through the 15th. So we are gearing up for a full moon week. And you know what that means? That means that we're just going to be feeling a little extra. And we have Mars in retrograde. We have Neptune just stationing to go direct. And we have Mercury finishing out its retrograde period. So there's a lot in the field. And I don't know about you, but I have definitely been feeling that Mars retrograde. It is making me feel a little bit edgy and angsty. And I'm kind of noticing it around the edges of my life as well. So, how has your irritation level been since Mars went into retrograde? And remember, Mars is here to teach us some good stuff about anger. And a lot of times when we get angry about something, it's an indication that our boundaries have been crossed, or even worse, that we haven't even set boundaries for ourselves. And I think that that's a lot of what we're working on while Chiron has been in Aries, and it's been in Aries for years, and it will be in Aries for a few more years. So we are in no way done with that, but this whole piece around boundaries and using our anger to inform us about whether we're living in alignment. We also have that North Node in Aries that is coming up to the 0 degree point, which is an important point. I'll be talking more about that when we get closer, which will be about mid-January. But we're really coming into the pinnacle of a lot of our boundary work, understanding that righteous anger can be a benefit. It can help us understand where we need to assert ourselves in terms of our boundaries, but too much anger can just be a force that is unnecessary and too intimidating to get the job done. So we're doing a lot of work with anger, with boundaries, with strength. So I talk a lot in Aries season about real strength versus false strength. So be thinking about that this week. Am I exhibiting real strength, which is when we are in our core, in our power, in alignment with what we feel passionate and purposeful about, versus when we're just on our soapbox yelling and trying to force people to do what we want to do, or even worse, pouting or discharging our anger onto people that don't deserve it. All right, well, let's look at the forecast. If you are listening on the podcast, I will walk you through this verbally. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the charts as I'm talking about the aspects. So we're going to begin on the 10th because that is Tuesday, but that's really when we see the first aspect of importance. And we are looking here at the sun making a trine aspect to Chiron. Chiron is in Aries. I was just talking about Chiron. And when we are looking at Chiron, we're looking at our wound and the things that have happened to us that have caused us to respond to the world in a certain way. And the sun is who we are. It's who the truth of us is, but it can take some time to discover what the truth of us is. And before we get there, we have to work with Aries energy. So Aries, if you remember, is the first house of the zodiac. It represents the zodiacal new year. Aries is where we come into the world, and we're dealing with this question of how do I perceive myself and how do other people perceive me? And a lot of times we learn how to perceive ourselves based on how other people perceive us. So it's sort of like we put the cart before the horse, and then we have to do all of this deconditioning to really understand who we truly are, which is when we come into the sun energy. So this week, as the sun and Chiron are making a trine, which is a positive aspect, both in fire signs, it's a good week to look at how you're identifying with the things in your life. And especially if you're identifying with them through the lens of being wounded. Like, for example, if you're somebody that's like, I don't ever have good friends, I can't ever meet good friends. That is how you are identifying, but is it true? Or maybe it's just something that has been true for you in the past, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be true for you forever. But like if you've ever had a reading for me, you know that I will walk you through this process and say, look, if you're having a hard time finding friends, maybe it's because you need to figure out who you are so then you can call in the right friends that are a vibrational match to who you are. So know that you're doing a lot of identity work this week. And when you bump up against a painful label that you put on yourself, that's Chiron, then you can look and say, well, maybe it's because I don't totally know myself. Or if you're somebody that is prone to like having an explosive temper or being really reactive, it can be like, wow, I'm noticing that I'm really reactive and I turn people off and people avoid me because I am reactive. Well, this is a good week to introspect on that and say, why am I so reactive? Like, what is going on in my life that feels so out of my control that I end up having to explode when something goes wrong? So, you see what I'm doing here with you as I'm kind of walking you through how to look with curiosity at the story. It's like the old school where you used to have to go and find the encyclopedia that would explain to you the answers. So, we're kind of looking at our own personal encyclopedias this week, trying to understand who we are, why we are the way we are, what happened to make us the way we are. So then we can actually discard that stuff and step into like who we really are, which is so much cleaner and clearer. On December 12th, we have Venus opposing Mars, both at 5 degrees. So Mars is in retrograde. So Mars is definitely limping along. He's not his strongest, most sexy, hot, masculine self. And Venus and Mars are in opposition right now. We could personify them, as I like to do in my teachings, and we could say the lovers are quarreling. We know that in an opposition, there's usually energy that is at odds or something that is out of balance. So your inner feminine, the version of you that wants to be receptive and wants to be taken care of, wants to be able to relax and feel abundant and feel beautiful, might be at odds right now with some of this anger that rises up into your system, right? Like we are talking about some edgy times here while Mars is in retrograde, especially in the sign of Leo. And that real edge comes in when you don't feel seen, because that is Leo. It's the sun. We want to feel seen and known and respected, and we want to be who we are. And there are probably people in your life that you're going to really notice don't see you. And so the part of you that wants to be sweet and beautiful and receptive might be a little bit triggered and kind of crabby. That's okay. You know, this is again an opportunity to open up your own encyclopedia and sort through and scan the pages and say, all right, what's going on here? I want to understand this. And, you know, we have some support, especially on the 12th. And these are fast aspects, but they are supportive aspects where the sun is also in a sextile with Vesta. And Vesta is the temple energy. So it reminds you to just take a deep breath, go into your proverbial temple, your safe space, leave all of the trappings of your life behind, take off your shoes, leave your cell phone at the door, and just go into some prayer, go into some meditation, take some space for yourself and ground yourself. This will be the antidote to any of that edgy energy that you're feeling. We also see that Venus and Mercury are making a sextile. So Mercury is also in retrograde and kind of moving slowly and limping along, but communication can be your biggest friend. And remember that with Mercury in retrograde in the sign of Sag, we want to be really careful that we're not approaching communication by being a big know-it-all. And I do talk about this in Astrology for Awakening, which is a new YouTube series that I'm releasing, which is where I take all of my teachings from 2024 on Star Narratives, the podcast, and I'm turning all of those into a standalone body of work where I just go through all of the astrological archetypes. And this week, I'm talking about the Sagittarius shadow. So check that out because that's going to really help you to understand what I mean when I say don't communicate through the lens of being a big old know-it-all. Nobody likes that. Nobody can hear that. That'll just make people defensive. And then, really, the next big aspect, which ends our week, is this full moon in the sign of Gemini. Now, again, this is the king and the queen. I talked about Venus and Mars as the lovers having a quarrel. This is the sun king and the moon queen, and they are also having a quarrel. And that's part of why full moons can feel really stressful for us because there are things that are out of balance, at odds with one another that need to be resolved. In this case, we are talking about our heart being the sun and our emotional digestion, our ability to process our emotions being the moon. And of course, in this axis of Sagittarius and Gemini, which is the axis of the mind. So it's always hard to tune into the heart and to process emotions when we're trying to do it mentally. So that's okay. There's not much that we can do to really bypass this, but we can understand that a lot of what we may be thinking might just be inaccurate or it might be fogged out. And I say that especially because Neptune is at 27 degrees of Pisces, so it's squaring this moon. And Neptune makes everything confusing. It's really hard to know what's real when it comes to Neptune, when Neptune is in the mix. Now, the beautiful part of Neptune is that it does connect us in with our higher power. So there's a lot of astrology that says, listen, you might be angry, you might be reactive, you might be super annoyed, and you might want to tell people that you know what's right, and you might want to argue with people. And when you're finding yourself dealing with that, feeling unseen, feeling stressed out, commune with your higher power, commune with your source, talk to your angels, talk to your guides, talk to your journal, like whatever. Know that that is where you're going to find the true peace. It's not going to be through anything that you think about or anything that you say. It's simply through just connecting with your most essential self, which is the part of you that is connected to source. All right, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all next week.